Honda Corporation began with one man making a decision and following his passionate desire until he produced the result. In 1938, while he was still in school, Mr. Honda took everything he owned and he invested it in a little workshop where he began to develop his concept of a special piston ring. He wanted to sell his work to Toyota Corporation, so he labored day and night, up to his elbows in grease, sleeping in his machine shop, always believing he could produce the result. In fact, he even pawned his wife's jewelry to stay in business. But when he finally completed the piston rings and he presented them to Toyota, he was told they didn't meet Toyota standards. He was sent back to school for 2 years, where he heard the incredible laughter of his instructors and fellow students as they talked about how absurd his designs were. But rather than focusing on the pain of the experience, he decided to continue to focus on his goal. Finally, after 2 more years, Toyota gave Mr. Honda the contract he dreamed of. His passion and his belief had paid off because he'd known what he wanted. He'd taken action. He'd noticed what was working and what wasn't working, and he kept changing his approach until he finally got what he wanted. But then a new problem arose. The Japanese government was gearing up for war, and they refused to give him the concrete that was necessary to build his factory. Did he quit here? Of course not. Did he focus on how unfair this was? No, that wouldn't have made it better. Did it mean to him that his dream had died? Absolutely not. Again, he decided to utilize the experience and develop another strategy. He and his team invented a process for creating their own concrete, and then they built their own factory. During the war, the factory was bombed twice. Even after going through all of this, it destroyed major portions of his manufacturing facility. What was Honda's response? He immediately rallied his teams, brought them outside, and got them to pick up the extra gasoline cans that the U.S. fighters had discarded. He called them, quote, gifts from President Truman, because they provided him with the raw materials he needed for his manufacturing process, materials that were unavailable at that time in Japan. Finally, after surviving all this, an earthquake leveled his factory. Honda finally had to sell his piston operation to Toyota. Now here's a man who clearly made strong decisions to succeed, just like we talk about. He had a passion and a belief in what he was doing. He had a great strategy. He took massive action. He kept changing his approach, but still, he'd not produced the results that he was committed to. Yet, you know what? Anyone else would have quit, but not Honda. He persevered. After the war, a tremendous gasoline shortage hit Japan, and Honda couldn't even drive his car to get food for his family. So finally, in desperation, he attached a small motor to his bicycle. He had a way to get around. Well, the next thing he knew, his neighbors were asking him if they'd make one of those, quote, motorized bikes, end quote, for them. One after another, they jumped on the bandwagon until he ran out of motors. He decided to build a plant that could manufacture motors for his new invention, but unfortunately, he didn't have enough capital. As before, he made the decision to find a way no matter what. His solution was to appeal to the 18,000 bicycle shop owners in Japan by writing them each a personal letter. He told them how they could play a role in revitalizing Japan through the mobility that his invention could provide, and he convinced 5,000 of them to advance the capital he needed. Still, his motorbike sold to only the most hardcore bicycle fans because it was too big and bulky. So he made one final adjustment. He created a much lighter, scaled-down version of his motorbike, which he christened the Super Cub, and it became a, quote, overnight success, earning him the Emperor's Award. Later, he began to export his motorbikes to the baby boomers of Europe and the United States, and then he followed up in the 70s with the cars that have now become so popular. Today, Honda Corporation employs more than 100,000 people, both in the United States and Japan, and it's considered one of the biggest car-making empires in Japan, outselling all but Toyota in the United States. It succeeds because one man understood the power of a truly committed decision that is acted upon no matter what the conditions on a continuous basis. So to sum it up, let me give you 6 quick keys to help you harness the power of decision, the power that shapes your experience of life every moment that you live it. First, remember the true power of making decisions. It's a tool, and you can use it in any moment to change your entire life. The minute you make a new decision, you set in motion a new cause, effect, direction, and destination for your life. Remember also that a real decision is measured by the fact that you've taken new action. If there's no new action, you haven't really decided. Second, realize the hardest step in achieving anything is making a true commitment, a true decision. Carrying out your commitments is often much easier than making the decision that leads to them. So make your decisions intelligently, but make them quickly. Don't labor forever over the decision of how or if you can do something. Just decide. Again, you know you've made a true decision when action flows from it. It becomes a cause set in motion. A critical rule that I've made for myself is to never leave the scene of a decision without first taking a specific action toward its realization. Third, make decisions often. The more decisions you make, the better you're going to get. Muscles get stronger with use, and so do your decision-making muscles. Unleash your power right now by making some decisions you've been putting off. You won't believe the energy and excitement it'll create in your life. And before you even go into your step 4, you may want to stop this tape right now and make a decision, one that could move you in a new direction. Here's step 4. Learn from your decisions. There are going to be times when you screw up, no matter what you do. And when that inevitable happens, instead of beating yourself into the ground, learn something. Ask yourself, what's good about this? Instead of focusing on the short-term setback, choose instead to learn the lessons that can save you time, money, or pain, and that'll give you the ability to succeed in the future. Step 5, stay committed to your decisions, but stay flexible in your approach. Now that may sound like a paradox, but it's not. Once you've decided who you want to be as a person, for example, don't get stuck on the means to achieving it. It's the result you're after. Too often in deciding what they want for their lives, people pick the best way they know at the time, but then they don't stay open to alternate routes. Don't become rigid in your approach. Cultivate the art of flexibility. 6th, enjoy making decisions. In any moment, a decision you make can change the course of your life forever. The very next person you stand behind in line or sit next to on an airplane, the very next phone call you make, the next movie you see, or book you read, or maybe even the tape you listen to. That could be the one, the single thing that causes the floodgates to open and all the things that you've been waiting for suddenly fall into place. Remember, a truly committed decision is the force that changes your life. Once you've absorbed that truth, when you decide that your life will ultimately be shaped by your decisions, then in that moment, your life will change forever. In that moment, you'll be empowered to take control of the force that shapes your life.
Reason guides but a small part of man, and that the least interesting. The rest obeys feeling, true or false, and passion, good or bad. Joseph Roux. Nature has placed mankind under the government of 2 sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. They govern us in all we do, in all we say, in all we think. Every effort we make to throw off our subjection will serve but to demonstrate and confirm it. Jeremy Bentham. The secret of success is learning how to use pain and pleasure instead of having pain and pleasure use you. If you do that, you're in control of your life. If you don't, life controls you. Tony Robbins.
Human beings are not random creatures. Everything we do for a reason. We may not be aware of the reason consciously, but there is a driving force behind all human behavior. The force is simply this. Everything you and I do, we do either out of our need to avoid pain or out of our desire to gain pleasure. Now, I know that sounds like an oversimplification, but I'm here to tell you these twin powers of pain and pleasure, or what I call the triple P, the pain-pleasure principle, have controlled every decision you've made consciously or unconsciously throughout your entire life. The pain-pleasure principle is the force that drives your decisions about what to wear, where you go, how you get there, what to do for a living, who you're in a relationship with, whether you're fit or fat. It also prevents most people from taking the first step on the pathway of possibilities, the one that could enrich the quality of their lives immediately. For example, have you ever procrastinated? Of course you have. What is procrastination? It's what happens when you know you should do something, but you don't. Now, why don't you take that action? Simply because you link more pain to taking action than you do to putting it off. Procrastination means putting off the pain, and that's why you do it. But haven't you had a time in your life when you procrastinated so long that eventually one day it reversed on you, and you had to stop procrastinating in a moment? Maybe around April 14th, for example. What happened on that day? You simply changed what you linked pain to. All of a sudden, your brain began to link up that not taking action will be much more painful than just getting your taxes done. This doesn't happen only in the realm of taxes, though, does it? I mean, if you've been in a destructive relationship and finally made the decision to use your personal power and take action and change your life, it's probably because you hit a level of pain you weren't willing to settle for anymore. You finally decided that not only was this relationship painful today, but it had been painful in the past, and most importantly, you became certain it would be painful in the future. You see, when we link pain to the past, the present, and the future, we hit a threshold that can quickly propel us to take action and make immediate changes. The problem is that most of us decide what to do based on what's going to create pain or pleasure in the short term instead of the long term. Why is this a problem? Well, because in order to succeed, most of the things that we value most require us to be able to break through the wall of short-term pain in order to have the long-term pleasure in the first place. This is a critical point, especially when you combine it with the fact that it's not actual pain that drives us, but really our fear that something will lead to pain. And it's not actual pleasure that drives us either, but our belief, our sense of certainty, that is, that somehow taking a certain action is going to lead to something that we really want, some real pleasurable emotion. In other words, we're not driven by reality, but by our perceptions of reality. Realize right now that the fear of pain wears many guises. It may look like fear of failure, or fear of success, or fear of the unknown, or fear that people will judge us. But no matter what you call it, you can always trace your behavior and whether or not you take action to the singular cause of what you link pain and pleasure to. If you're failing to take action in any area of your life, you can be assured there's one reason. You've learned to associate more pain to taking action than not taking action. And therefore, there's only one way to make a change. Change what you link pain and pleasure to. Otherwise, you can make a short-term change, but it's not going to last. You can put yourself on a diet, for example, and you can push yourself and discipline yourself, but as long as you link pain to eating the foods that'll support you, I'm here to tell you, you'll always be overweight. You must change what you associate in your gut. Willpower is not enough. Now, another term for these pain-pleasure linkages I call Neuro-Associations. Simply, this means the associations that you and I establish within our nervous system that determines what we'll do. And the good news is this: we can learn to condition our minds, bodies, and emotions to link pain or pleasure to whatever we choose. That's the secret to changing your whole life, all your behaviors, all your actions, and your results. By changing what we link pain and pleasure to, we can instantly change our behavior. Let me offer you an example of how I did this with myself. In my own life, in spite of my parents' best efforts, there were times when my family didn't always have enough money even to buy the foods that we all wanted most. So when I became an adult and started earning a substantial income, I found myself overeating on a regular basis, especially those foods I always wanted. And eventually I achieved balance, but only after gaining and then having to lose 38 pounds. Recently, I realized I linked pain to not eating everything on my plate. I mean, if it was on my plate, I had to eat it. I was compelled. And I realized I needed to change this disempowering association because recently I'd gotten larger plates and I was eating more and more food. I clearly needed to condition my mind and emotions to link pain to overeating and pleasure to the idea of eating lighter foods and smaller amounts. Most importantly, I needed to link pleasure to the first step to losing weight. And I want to reinforce that. Most of us give ourselves pain when we screw up, but we don't give ourselves pleasure when we want to move ahead. See, I began to link pleasure to pushing the plate away while there was still food on it. This went totally against my past conditioning. You know, you need to eat everything you've got while it's there. I was able to change this simply by conditioning myself. I began to push the plate away while I cranked up my favorite music, working myself into a peak state and feeling the sensations of pleasure as I pushed the plate away again and again. I repeated this process over and over until pretty soon it felt great to push away my plate and the food was still on it. You can't imagine what a freeing experience this was for me. So what's the first step to creating a change? The first step is simply becoming aware of the power that pain and pleasure, or neuro-associations, exert over every decision, therefore every action that we take. This awareness means understanding these linkages, the linkages between ideas and words and images and sounds and the sensations of pain and pleasure. They're happening constantly. Unless you and I take conscious control of this constant stream of linkages that our brains are making, then they're going to happen unconsciously, automatically. Your brain, with or without your conscious guidance, continually processes what your senses are perceiving, and it forms an intricate network of gut-level linkages between ideas, images, sounds, events, feelings, and your memory of what leads to pain and what leads to pleasure. anytime you experience a significant amount of pain or pleasure, either emotionally or physically, your brain immediately searches for a cause. And once your brain discovers this cause-effect relationship, it links up that association in your nervous system so that in the future you won't have to experience the pain again. It becomes a warning signal that you're able to search for whenever you enter a situation like this. It also guides you in knowing what to do to get back into pleasurable emotional states and do it more quickly than if you didn't have this system. This is our most basic survival instinct at work. Now, problems can arise, though, when we make false connections. Envision a baby crawling along the edge of a couch. If he reaches the edge, is it possible that he'll continue to crawl until he falls? Absolutely. Why? Because the baby has no associations in his nervous system linking going over the edge to pain. And if the poor baby does fall, he may not link up the pain of falling with coming to the edge of the couch, at least not initially. He may simply decide that couches cause pain, so he may avoid couches altogether until he makes the proper distinction. The problem making false connections, of course, is not limited to toddlers. Grown-ups do it too. I once knew a woman who was a very successful artist who hadn't had a relationship with a man for 12 years. Now, this woman had once been extremely passionate about everything she did, and it's what made her such a great artist. But you know what happened? Because she'd been so passionate in that relationship that bottomed out 12 years before, she asked herself what was the cause of the pain, and her brain linked up that her passion had destroyed the relationship. So she decided never to get passionate in a relationship again. This is what we call a false neuro-association. She had determined a false cause. The real culprit was that she and her partner had different values. They had different rules. Yet you can understand that because she linked pain to her passion, she started avoiding it unconsciously at all costs. But then she began to feel pain because she missed the passion. This is a perfect example of the strange ways in which we all sometimes wire ourselves. And you and I must understand these distinctions so we don't fall prey as well. The danger is that we often set up false neuro-associations that exert a negative control over our entire lives. If an inexperienced person makes his first attempt at speaking in public and he doesn't do very well, he may establish a neuro-association that links public speaking with pain. Later, he'll use this same experience to back up the idea of never getting up before an audience again. False neuro-associations can be incredibly destructive then. That's why it's so critical to evaluate any associations we have in our mind and see, are they really true? Or did we link up a false cause? We've got to evaluate linkages before they become a part of our unconscious decision-making process. So often we blame the wrong cause and thereby close ourselves off from possible solutions. Nevertheless, the instinct to create neuro-associations, that is, to link pain and pleasure to things and to map it out in our brains, has been shaped by millions of years of evolution. Our nervous systems have been designed to guide our decision-making process by developing a set of signals to teach our brains what to approach and what to avoid, especially what to avoid, since that plays a bigger role in your survival. Now, I'm not suggesting that you and I are totally controlled by our environment, or that we are purely conditioned products of whatever we've been punished or rewarded for. Of course not. I'm not a believer in the behavioral hypothesis that says we are purely the result of our conditioning. But, and this is a big but, if we don't take control of that conditioning, I believe that these principles take over by default. The power that we have as human beings is such a unique gift in that we have the ability to override our experiences and consciously decide what will mean pain and what will mean pleasure. Anyone who succeeds in life has learned to override their conditioning. One decision that I made in my own life that's really shaped my destiny was that of linking incredible pleasure to learning. You see, I began to realize that learning how to shape human behavior and emotion could give me virtually everything I wanted in my life. I realized it could get me out of pain and into pleasure in a moment. That learning could unlock the secrets behind actions and therefore give me the key to producing results. And through that, I knew I could create a better life physically, that I'd be able to connect more deeply with the people I cared about, that I could get myself to take the kinds of actions that would make a difference in millions of people's lives and give me a sense of joy and fulfillment every day that I was alive. What are some of the experiences of pain and pleasure that have shaped your life? I mean, think about it for a moment. And I'm here to tell you that any part of your life that you want to change but haven't been able to, maybe a drug addiction, an alcohol addiction, challenges in relationships, challenges in business, no matter what the challenge may be, it can be traced directly and ultimately to your neuro-associations of pain and pleasure. If you've been unable to create change in your life, it's because you link too much pain to taking the very actions that could create the change. How can we take control of this process then and forge our own neuro-associations? Start by becoming aware of when they're formed and control your focus in those moments. Let's say, for example, you leave for home after a frustrating day at work. When you get home, your spouse greets you at the door and tries to cheer you up, but it doesn't work. Why? Because you're so angry. You're angry about what's happened at work and you're still steamed. You're seeing your spouse's face while you're in this angry state. Pretty soon, when you see their face, guess what you're going to feel? Angry. You have created an instant false neuroassociation. If you realize this, you can begin to interrupt this negative association before it takes hold. And the first step is to wake up and realize these associations are being made constantly. Remember, anytime you're in a peak state, whether it be positive or negative, be careful of what you focus on consistently while you're in that state, because whatever you notice while you're in that state will get linked neurologically. Next, begin to question your false neuroassociations. Winston Churchill once said, "Truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it. Ignorance may deride it. But in the end, there it is." Churchill was right. The truth will eventually emerge if you just continue to question the false associations that have limited your life in the past. You can analyze them to death if nothing else. Finally, assume the power to change what you link pain and pleasure to. Remember that the foremost power is awareness. Remember also that trying to change your behavior in the short term will only create short-term results. You must change the cause, and that always is what you associate pain and pleasure to in this situation, and that'll give you the power to change your behavior over the long term. You can immediately take control by changing your focus. If right now you're afraid to take some action, begin to focus on the possibility of the price you'll pay if you don't take action, and that'll change what you associate to that decision. So many people don't take action because they focus on how much pain they think they'd have if they took action. You must instead focus on the pain of inaction and on the pleasure of taking action.